When I think about fourth wall breaks, what comes to mind is a scene from Y Tu Mama Tambien. The camera is handheld and the footage is a little shaky, which has this humanizing effect. It's almost as if the camera assumes the place of a person, slowly walking towards this woman, waiting to be acknowledged. The experience of watching a film is mostly a safe and passive one. We can experience vicarious thrills and freely judge the poor choices of horror movie victims without any consequence. When it comes to these fictional characters, we see them, but they don't see us. Fourth wall breaks disrupt this illusion. They undermine the idea of the audience as spectator by blurring the lines between our world and that which is make-believe. When a character acknowledges our presence, we lose our status, or, depending on the film, our privilege as voyeurs. No film does this more aggressively than Michael Haneke's Funny Games, a film about two teens who insist on involving the audience in their sadistic antics. The film's story is very simple. A nihilistic duo torture an unsuspecting family until all three of them are killed, but the way in which the story is told is anything but. In the midst of his cruel games, Paul will often turn to check in with the audience.
Das geht nicht. Gewettet muss werden. Was meinen Sie? Denken Sie, Sie haben eine Chance zu gewinnen? Sie sind doch auf Ihrer Seite, oder? Also, auf ihn setzen.
It's as if he's aware of the fact that his violent hobby is the source of our entertainment. And when Paul's right-hand man is killed, we grimly realize that the entire plot is beholden to his control.
Wo ist die scheiß Fernbedienung?
This makes any sort of hope for justice, or relief even, out of the question, which renders the whole story as a tale of a family's meaningless suffering. Paul and Peter are frightening, because they seem to have no human motive other than simply entertaining themselves, which is why Paul constantly acknowledges the audience. In Funny Games, Haneke argues that violence and suffering can sometimes wrongly be turned into spectacle, and his fourth wall-shattering approach is his polarizing way of confronting us with what he sees as our disturbing need to consume this type of media. There are more than a few filmmakers who have adopted this idea of the fourth wall break as a confrontational device, involving the audience in ways that are uncomfortable and disorienting. In Do the Right Thing, there is a scene in which the characters invade the viewer's headspace with ugly racial slurs.
High jumping, spear chucking, 360-degree basketball dunking, titsoon, spade, mullignan. Take your fucking pizza and go the fuck back to Africa.
You little slanty-eyed, me no speaky American, own every fruit and vegetable stand in New York, bullshit Reverend Sun Young Moon, Summer Olympic 88 Korean kickboxing Sabaran bitch.
You Goya bean eating, 15 in a car, 30 in an apartment, pointy shoes, red wearing.
The characters look the audience directly in the eye, daring them to identify with their bigoted words and thus urging them to uncover and confront their own racial bias, which may be lurking just beneath the surface of social performance. In this way, direct address can be a powerful and unsettling way to implicate us, the audience, in something that pervades society at large. Last week, I talked about the most recent season of Orange is the New Black, which ends in the tragic death of a beloved character. The last few haunting moments involve a flashback in which a much younger, pre-incarcerated P looks into the camera, breaking into a devastating smile. Now, the series that led up to this moment was very much centered on how broken the American justice system was, chronicling the exploitation of for-profit prisons, the lack of accountability for abusive guards, the privileges given to wealthy offenders, the mistreatment of the mentally ill, the cruelty of solitary. The list, horrifyingly, goes on and on. Poussey, a young queer black woman serving a 6-year sentence for a low-level drug crime, is in many ways representative of the type of person who is likely to be targeted by this quote-unquote justice system. In Orange is the New Black, P's death was not singular but systemic, something that occurred not because of the evil of one, but the institutionalized evil of a justice system that most of us are ignorant or indifferent to. P's glance into the camera confronts us with our apathy towards this class of people who are arguably the most dehumanized among us. These storytellers ambitiously seek to remind us of our complicity in these systems of power. Fourth wall breaks here can act like an electric shock to those of us who may be a little too comfortable and complacent. But sometimes, depending on the story that you are telling, the audience doesn't need to be jolted, but seen and considered. In The Big Short, when the characters turn to the audience, they do so to expose the corruption and greed that led to the 2007 financial crisis. Here, the fourth wall breaks functioned as a device to convey information to the audience. The film was very aware of the significance of information, or more importantly, the lack thereof during the crisis. A big reason why almost all of the devastating criminality was left unpunished was because it was shrouded in mind-numbing, needlessly complicated jargon. The time was marked with an almost apocalyptic sense of confusion and frustration. This is why the fourth wall breaks were so vital. Turning to the audience and talking to them in a direct and human way did a lot to demystify a foreign language that seemed as though it was meant to intentionally alienate people. Kevin B. Lee said it best when he explained that the fourth wall break showed how Wall Street is a world of reality distortion and myth-making, creating a constant need to cut through the bullshit. And the movie is pretty committed to the straightforward approach, going as far as to call bullshit on itself, because why not?
Yep, we're going. Let's go.
Look at this, look at this. This guy says that the housing market's a giant bubble.
Okay, so this part isn't totally accurate. You know, we didn't find Jared Bennett's housing bubble pitch in the lobby of a bank that rejected us. The truth is, a friend had told Charlie about it, and I read about it in Grant's Interest Rate Observer.
This is crazy.
In The Big Short, the fourth wall breaks work to humanize a crisis. In House of Cards, they work to humanize a character. Frank is a wicked Washington elite whose hollow pursuit of power is so total and unfettered that he often is on the verge of becoming more of a caricature of today's unscrupulous politicians, rather than someone who feels real and human. In order to keep the audiences emotionally invested in someone so morally deplorable, fourth wall breaks are frequently used in personal and confessional ways. We are Frank's most trusted confidant, and we are at the receiving end of exclusive and unguarded monologues that detail his troubled childhood, his thoughts on faith, and his master plans, of course. In an interview in which Kevin Spacey discusses these fourth wall breaks, he talks about how he imagines that he is talking to his best friend, someone who he trusts deeply. The intimacy that this fosters is one of the most effective ways in which fourth wall breaks are used. We also see this with a lot of characters who are alienated in the world that they inhabit, who are in some ways searching for connection. We may not actually be able to identify with being the black sheep of the family, or growing up in a world of apathetic adults, or the ostracized existence of a sex worker. But the feeling of loneliness will always be universal, and when a character is an outsider who can only turn to the audience for commiseration, it's almost impossible not to relate with that melancholy sense of isolation. One of my favorite instances of this type of fourth wall break is, of course, in Y Tu Mamá También. This moment is centered on Luisa, a character who has recently found out she is dying the same day she realizes her husband has been cheating on her. And after an impulsive, emotionally charged decision, she finds herself alone in a secluded part of Mexico with two horny and impudent teenage boys, carrying the overwhelming burden of her secret alone. None of the fictional characters know that she is about to die. Only we do, and her coy glance to the audience reminds us of the secret that we share. It creates a sense of intimacy so powerful that it pulls us into her story and her inner world, and the boundary between reality and fiction becomes just a little less distinct.
Espera otro día por vivir sin ti. El espejo no miente, me veo tan diferente. Me haces falta tú.